Hey everybody, this is Shane from Fugatech 3D Printing. Today we're going to do another episode of my Understanding Simplify 3D. Now, I probably should have done this episode first before diving into some of the finer settings, because there's a lot of people that ask me, why do you like Simplify 3D? Can you explain it? Do an overall video of how to just get your first print done with Simplify 3D. So that's what this video is going to be. Now, I will say this video is going to be a little bit longer, going to be between 20 and 25 minutes, but to save you some time, down below in the description, I'm going to put time links. So for each tab that I talk about within Simplify 3D, I will have a link down there that you can click on and be able to jump right to the setting that you want to look for, or at least the tab, and find the setting you want to look for to get my brief overview of it. Again, this is going to be a very brief overview. I'm not going to dive in deep to any of these details. That's what all the future videos are going to be. So let's get started. So the very first thing obviously is going to be, go ahead and start up Simplify 3D. Once you have that started up, it's going to come up blank, be something like this. If this is the first time you're starting it up, you're going to get a configuration wizard. If you've had Simplify 3D already on your computer and you've been messing around with it, but you weren't quite sure if you set things up properly, we're going to walk you through it. So all we have to do is come up here into Help, and we're going to go to Configuration Assistant. Go ahead and give that a click. Now, this for me takes a minute because it goes out to the Simplify 3D servers and looks for all of the active profiles that it knows of. Now, I did this recording earlier and I did this testing earlier, so it comes up much faster now, but the first time I did, it took a minute. So sometimes you might need to wait. Now, for this example, we're going to do two quick setups here. One is if you have a monoprice select mini, that has a profile built in here, and one if you have a printer that isn't in the list. Now, this list is quite extensive. Look, the 101 Hero, what was that, $80 3D printer that Angus over Makers News looked at. That's even in here. There's a very good chance that what you want is going to be in here. Look, the G-Tech Pursa i3 now is in here. It wasn't before. So if your printer is not listed in here, you're going to go all the way down the bottom and hit Other. Whoops, I have to hit it actually. All the way down the bottom, hit Other. And hit Next. Now here we can name our printer. So we're just going to call this new printer. That's fine. It's a Cartesian. So the difference between a Cartesian and a Delta, if you've already bought your 3D printer, you should know the difference. A Cartesian is going to be an i3 style. Or anything with a square build plate. There could be anything that's XY style, D-bot, H-bot, RepRap, i3, all the different names for them. And the other one's going to be a Delta, and that's going to be a round build plate. And a Delta, again, you'll know the difference if you've already bought one, so we're not going to go into that. I personally like to have my baud rate up at 2,500, or 250,000, I'm sorry. And your build volume. So, again, you should know this from when you bought your printer. Does your printer have a 100 by 100 by 100? Probably not. So we're going to go say the G-Tech didn't have a profile in there. I'm going to do this as 200 on the X, 200 on the Y, and 180 on my Z axis. And I know that because that is the information that's given to you when you purchase your 3D printer. Next step down here is the nozzle diameter. Most printers out there come with a 0.4 nozzle. So you can go ahead and leave that. If yours comes with anything different, say you have like a Taz, they come with a 0.5. So that's just something to be aware of, but you'll set that in here. Another thing to note here is the filament diameter in Simplify 3D defaults to 1.75 millimeters. If you use Cura, the default there is 3 millimeters because that is what the Ultimaker uses. So keep that in mind. We're going to leave this at 1.75. I have one extruder, and this is important right here. Does your printer have a heated bed? For me, it is a yes. We would hit Next, and then we could hit Finish and dive right in, and it would work. But we're going to go back, and for this example, we're going to use the monoprice select mini. So we're going to back out here, printer, scroll on up, monoprice select mini, hit Next, and that is it right there. It already has all the settings that you need in there, ready to roll. Hit Finish, and here is our build plate. So this is how the printer is roughly oriented. And now we have to actually go into the settings and see what can we do inside Simplify 3D. So right here down on the bottom left, there's a process. You can either hit Edit Process Settings, or you can double click it. I'm a double click kind of person. And here we are. So the process name is Process 1. Your profile is here. So for other printers that you have, I already have one in here for my Mini. We're working on the new one though. It'll have them all listed in here. So if you have multiple printers, you can store profiles in here for each one. Also down here below, you can have filaments for each one. Some of my other printers, like the FT5, has about 25 filaments saved in there for all the different filaments that I've tested over the past several months. Over here on your quality, this would be kind of key for your first print until you actually dial the printer in. If you're doing a fast print, it's going to be a much larger, much more rougher looking print. If you're doing, I shouldn't say larger, it's going to be a larger extrusion rate for your prints, or medium will be medium quality, and high would be a much finer, so you can capture more small details with the high setting. We're going to keep on a medium, and here you can slide here to set your infill percentage. So this, again, we're just going to leave it right here on default of 20%. Raft and support, we'll go into those when we get to the additions tab and support tab. Right here, primary extruder. This printer only has one extruder. If you had more than one, you would go ahead and hit add extruder. On the right is the overview. So tool 0 is what we have designated as primary extruder. That'll come into play later. We already said in our, well, if you had set it yourself, but the monoprice segment comes with a 0.4 millimeter nozzle. Our extrusion multiplier is 1.0, so it's coming out at the ratio is 1. So this will go into later when you go to refine your print and actually get the extrusion rate to be precisely 0.4 millimeters. So sometimes you have to do some calibration on it, but we're gonna leave this here as default. Again, we're just trying to get a print done. Down at the bottom, you're gonna leave retraction as default. So retraction is when you finish one line, I'll call it a line, a trail, a line of a print, and your print head has to move to another spot. It retracts filament up into the extruder, it moves, and then it pushes it back out. That way you don't have any stringing between move points on your print, because that can get really bad really quick. And for the coasted end and wipe nozzle, we're going to leave those as default. So next tab here is layer settings. So here on the left we have primary extruder, and we only have one selected. If we were to have two here on the first extruder tab, you would then have more options here, but we don't. So for the medium quality, this is part of the settings in here are really affected by this up here. So fast, this goes to 0.3 millimeters. If we go to medium, it goes to 0.2, and if we go to high, it goes to 0.1. It also changes our top and bottom layers. But again, we're keeping this on medium. So it keeps our infill at 20%, top layers 3, bottom layers 3, and shells 2. This is what makes Simplify3D, I think, so simple and easy to use. It is simply Simplify3D. It is just an amazing tool because there's no math here. How many perimeters do you want? Do you want 2, 3, 4, 5? You don't. In Cure, you have to do the math behind it, and that honestly just gets rather annoying to me, and I like to just set it and be done with it. I don't have to worry about how many multiples of my extruder, my layer height is. I don't have to worry about any of that. I personally prefer inside out rather than outside in. I prefer that because when you have extreme overhangs, it gives your outermost layer of the perimeter something to grab onto, which is the inner layer, because you have two shells here. It needs to grab onto something. The print islands, we're not going to worry about that, and single. So if you ever have a print that you want to print in vase mode, this is what you're going to do. I'll do a video separately just on how to print in vase mode at a later date. Over here on the right, the first layer settings, my very first video was about this, but for this print, we're going to leave this default. This is how you get to have that nice first layer fully filled in, nice and flat, not over extruding, under extruding it, no gaps in the first layer. These three settings here deal a lot with that. And the start points, we like to let Simplify3D do the work for us. We're going to tell it go ahead and optimize it for print speeds. Okay, on our additions tab now, we have use skirt, brim, and use raft. What's the difference between skirt and brim, you say? A skirt is out alongside the print. So your very first layer, it will be 4 millimeters out, and it will put down 2 traces around your print. Now this I like to use to prime my nozzle so that when my printer starts the very first layer, it comes out nice and clean. And I don't have to worry about it missing. It still has to extrude 10 or 15 millimeters before filament starts to come out. Nope, it's already ready to go because of the skirt. Now, if we were to change this and make it into what is called a brim, you would set this to 0. Your offset is at 0, and we would up this to maybe 10 or 15. So this is crucial when you have something with a very, very small surface coverage. So there's not much of the print that touches the build surface. You need to spread that out a little bit. And by spreading out, having more layers, you increase build plate adhesion, and you have more chances of having a successful print. And this is really crucial if you print things like the Harry Potter wands, for example. I have to use a brim on that just so I can spread it out, because that one little half-inch area is not enough to hold the print onto the build plate. Next down here is raft. So enabling this creates a raft underneath your print. I will have a separate video to explain this, but if you have poor adhesion, or you have a very small part or a very intricate part that does not have a nice flat surface to put down on your print surface, you're going to want to go ahead and enable the raft. But for this, we're not going to have that, and we're going to leave this as the 4 millimeters as default and have 2 traces going around. Now for prime pillar and for ooze shield, if you have dual extrusion, you'll want to worry about these, but that we'll check out at a later date. Next tab is infill. So this is going to be how dense your print is actually going to be. You're going to use your layers, perimeters, and top and bottom layers to pretty much make how hard the shell of your print is going to be. One can be pretty soft feeling if you're using like a PETG or something, and PLA will be much more rigid. So if you want to have an even stronger print, you're going to want to play with your infill settings. Personally, I like fast honeycomb. It creates a much stronger print overall, and I just like the way it is. If I'm printing something very, very small, I will use rectilinear or very, very high infill. Rectilinear is the way to go. Otherwise, fast honeycomb is perfect for it. Our infill pattern is rectilinear or concentric. We're gonna leave it as rectilinear for this. And here you have your infill percentage. So you can slide it up here and you see it changes there, or you can just type it in down here and it sets it. So overlap is gonna be how much of our infill overlaps with the outer layers. We're gonna leave that as the default 30%. The extrusion width, so of our extrusion here is set to 1.0. The infill is 120% of that. So we're extruding a little bit more plastic for our infill to make sure that it is nice and solid. Minimum infill length is just how far the minimum size it can go. It won't go any smaller than this. If you do have a very intricate part with a lot of small areas, you're going to want to lower this down much lower. Sparse infill, leave that as the default. And the solid diaphragm, also leave that as off. You might need that for a certain type of print, but not for this one. On the right, you can change your angles and offsets, but this is nothing that you should be worried about right now just to get your first print done. Okay, support. So support is whenever you have an overhang that is too great and you would actually have a drooping. Just remember, you can't print in thin air, so it's always good to analyze your model before you start printing and see, do you really need support? Simplify3D has a great automatic support generation feature built into it, but sometimes you need to play with your settings a little bit just to get that to be perfect. So if you go ahead and enable generate support, that's going to open up all these settings. We're leaving it as primary extruder. If you have a dual extruder and you're doing dual filament types like the new Ultimaker does, then you would have two here and you could select the different types of filaments that you're using. But for this, we only have one, so we're using whatever we have in our nozzle to be our support material. Infill percentage, I like to leave this default. 30% is more than enough. If you need to do more dense, then that is something you'll need to play with later, but 30% is great to start out with. Extra inflation distance. This will add a little bit of extra support outside of the model. So going off of one of Angus's recommendations, I like to keep that at a 0.5 millimeters. You can leave it as a default. There is nothing wrong with that. It will still print great. But having this up a little bit higher just gives you a little bit extra to pull the support off of the print without harming it. Now the dense support layers, if you have a print that has a great deal amount of support underneath of it or a very nice flat surface, you're going to want to put some dense support layers under there. For me, 2 to 3 is generally enough. I've never had to use more than that, and I've never tried any more than that. But I have perfect prints with just using 2 or 3 dense support layers. So always it will do it so at 2 layers before it needs to actually print over top of that support, it will print 2 dense support layers, and those will each be 70% infill, which is a perfect amount. You'll get great results with this if you set it as that. And you want to print support every layer. We don't want to skip any because then we're just going to screw up our print. Separation from part, we're going to leave this always default. We'll explain this later in a video. And the automatic placement, again, leave everything automatic. We don't want to mess with any of that here. Okay, so the next tab is temperature. So this is kind of crucial. So if you're doing a custom or using the other to configure Simplify3D, if you don't check that heated bed, this will not be there, but that's okay. You can always remove it and you can always add it back in without a problem. Now, depending on the temperature you're going to use, for me, it's 210. I'm actually going to do this at 205 for PLA. That's my personal favorite. Now, if you wanted to change things up, you could add a set point so that at layer 5, it would change down to, say, 200 or 195. Whatever it is you want to set it as, you have the ability to do so. I personally print the entire print at 205. So let's get back up here. So on the overview, T0, we set that right up here. Tool 0, that's the same thing here in our temperature. So that's how we're identifying which extruder we're using. The controller type for this is extruder. For the heated bed, oh, look at that, heated bed is checked. Relay loops, we're gonna leave this off, and we're gonna wait for temperature controller before it starts. If you don't do this, so some people will uncheck this for the heated bed. Personally, I want to make sure that both my heated bed and my extruder are up to temperature before it starts to print. That's a personal preference of mine, and that is the default in Simplify3D. Again, we were talking about how to add your layers. If you go here to heated bed, you can also, so say you want to start at 60 degrees for PLA, but then after 5 or 10 layers, we'll just do 5, you're going to want to change that down to 50 degrees or 40 degrees, whatever it is that you decide you can do. Okay, now for the cooling tab. Over here is already set as fan for layer 1 is 0. If you're printing PLA or PETG, I'll tell you right now, you want your first layer to have no cooling fan. You want that to go down nice and hot so that it stays nice and straight. Then after the second or even third layer, you could go ahead and up that to 50, 60, or even 100%. On different printers, it's different settings, so you have to check it out for what it works out for you. I know for me on my Fugatech FT5, the way my fan setup is there, if I go over anything over 60%, it lowers my nozzle temperature too much because there's too much air being pushed out. So I do it at 60%. On the Monoprice Select Mini, 100% is great. Over here on the right, speed overrides. So anything under 15 seconds, it's going to reduce it down to 20% of the speed. This is crucial so that you can make sure that you have enough cooling on that layer before you extrude the next layer on top of it. If you don't have this enabled, you will run into problems with looks like a drooping or wrinkly sides of your print. Different results for different people, but that is generally what it is. You could easily bump this up to 50% and still be quite okay with the cooling that comes on the Monoprice Select Mini. Other printers, it might not work out as well, so this is something you'll have to play with later. And for the fan overrides, if you're going to be doing any type of extreme bridging, you're going to want to go ahead and take a look at this. And this just ensures that if you don't have this set to 100%, you're going to want to enable this because you want lots of speed and lots of cooling when it comes to bridging. Okay, here in the G-code, so here you can change a lot of things that have to do with the core functionality of your printer. All of this we're going to leave here as default because if you start messing around with this, you are going to run into problems, especially if you start changing your build volume, your build origin offset. This is huge why people say, hey, my printer doesn't print in the middle of my build plate. It's probably because they set something here in the offset, the toolhead offset has something, or the global G-code offsets have something in them. Those should all be zeros or across the board unless you have a certain setup for you. If you're using a Delta, that is not the case, but for this Cartesian style printer, this is how we're going to leave it. So next up is the scripts tab. So this tells your printer what it's going to be doing, and this kind of gets a little bit advanced, but the nice thing about this profile is it already has some of these built in, and we don't really have to change too much of them. So G28, it's going to home all the accesses. Right here, this G1Z 0.2, it's going to raise the nozzle up that much. It's going to reset the retraction distance, and it's going to purge the nozzle. So you don't have to do a skirt with the Monoprice Select Mini because it already does it. It does this purge sequence at the beginning of the print. So basically it drags along 100 millimeters on the x-axis, extruding filament to prime the nozzle, and then it's ready to start printing. That's a unique thing about this printer. You could set that up on any printer if you wanted to. That's something that you can do on your own at another time. Layer change, retraction, and tool, those are all going to stay blank. Those get very, very advanced. I recommend that you don't touch any of those unless you know what you're doing. Here for the ending strip, we only have to add one thing to here that I highly recommend, but let's go through what's here first. So the very first thing, it's going to turn off the extruder. It's going to turn off the bed. This is a huge safety issue here, so be sure that those are always on no matter what your printer is. Make sure those two are there. Next, it's going to prepare the part for removal. So it's going to move the y-axis back a bit so that it's out of the way so you can pull your part off. And then it's going to disable all the motors. The one thing that I would like to add in here is the M107 command. And this is to turn off your fan. Now, you don't need that layer fan running all the time. There are some cases that you might want it to be on, but personally, I don't need the fan running all that time, so I like to turn that off on pretty much every printer I have. Now the other tab. This comes into when we want to talk about speed. You're going to come here to the other tab. Default printing speed in this profile is 40 millimeters a second. You know what? For this printer, we're going to bump that up to 55 because they say that's what is the max. And Simplify3D does a great job of changing the speed for what it needs to for this, how long it takes to do each layer. So it is a great thing to do. So go ahead and bump that up. Let Simplify3D do the work for you. Your outline underspeed, solid underfill, support structures, XYZ movement, and your Z movement, leave these all as default. If these are something that you want to change later on, by all means, go ahead and dive right in and do it. But just for understanding what they do, your outline, you want to make sure that that slows down. So it's the very outmost outline. You want that to be nice and slow so that it adheres very well to the inside layers of your outline or to the layer below it. Your solid infill, again, you don't need to go that fast. When you're printing out solid filament, it is going many, many passes across your print, putting out a lot of plastic. Go ahead, slow down. Nothing's going to hurt you. Support structure underspeed. Sometimes people will do this even higher than 80% underspeed, simply because you want to be sure that your support structures go down nice and slow so that they don't blip at all. A 30% infill for support structures is pretty sparse. So if one messes up, you could lose an entire support tower, and that is just no good for anyone, and you're going to have a failed print. Here again, this is the one thing that trips a lot of people up. Make sure you check your filament diameter. If you are using Simplify3D with an Ultimaker or some other printer out there, I think the Taz also uses a 3mm filament. Be sure you set that in here. If not, you can leave it right at that. For the filament price, I use cheap filament, so 20 bucks is more than enough, and the grams per centimeters cubed, I just leave that as default because I don't know what to change it to. And these are some settings for bridging. For this video, we're going to leave these default. We don't want to mess any with that. And finally, we have the advanced tab. So this again is another very advanced tab, just as the scripts and G-code is. If you mess around with too much in here, you will hurt. I will tell you, you always want to have, for slicing behavior, you want this to heal, because you want it to always try and get your prints to work, and a gap fill when necessary. So if it has two, say, perimeters that have a little bit of space and not enough for infill, well, guess what? This is going to come in and make sure that it fills that gap in for you, so you don't have any separating layers. Everything else in here, ooze control, movement behavior, and tool change retraction, we're going to leave all that as default for now. We'll go into those much later in another video. Okay, so that is your basic setup. So now let's import a model and take a look what it looks like in here and what it looks like when it's sliced. We're going to import. I have a great model here, XYZ calibration cube, which is an awesome thing to print with and to make sure that your printer is printing accurately, and you can check retraction settings with this print. So it is a great resource. I highly recommend it. Link will be down in the description below. Now, in order to manipulate Simplify3D, it should be pretty self-explanatory, but we're just going to dive into it real quick. If you left click, you can pan around one point. If you right click, it basically grabs the screen and you can move it any which way you want to. So combining with the two gets you to move around nice and easily. So we have our model in here. If you double click your model, you'll bring up some settings here on the right. So if you wanted to make this a bigger model, 200%, bam, there it is. Now it's a 40 by 40 cube. Here's your size. If you wanted to uncheck uniform scaling, which pretty much you always want to keep that enabled, but if you didn't, say you want to just make this really tall, well, we can make our Z 200%, and look at that, it's a nice tall print now. That is something that you can do, and if you screw it all up and you want to start from zero, reset scale, takes you right back to what the defaults were, and it rechecks the uniform scaling. If you have a print now that's looking the wrong way, so let's say right here is actually the front of our printer. Well, I want to be able to see that. So we're going to rotate it on the Z axis, 90 degrees, and bam, our X is now facing my way. But that kind of throws it off simply because that was X, so we can reset rotation. But if you have another print, any other type of print that you want to actually face the front of your printer, you'll want to go ahead and change that. Also, if you have anything else in a print that you need to change up its orientation some way, you can go ahead and do that right here with change rotation. Okay, so we're happy with the way this looks. We think we know what it's going to do. We're going to go ahead and hit prepare to print, and it slices through it super quick. Up here is a nice little area that shows you some details. So the build time for this is 28 minutes. I will say right now, I have hardly ever seen Simplify3D be correct on the time. It always ends up being, for a short print like this, 2 to 3 minutes more. A long print, it can be hours, even days wrong, depending on the print. Our filament length, so we're going to use 1.3 meters. The plastic weight is going to be 3.98 grams. And the material cost is going to cost me 8 cents in order to print this print. It's not too bad. Something to be here is build plate and tool head is good to see. And for our coloring, right now we're on feature type. So it tells us all the different types of features. And if I scroll this down a little bit, you can see our different types of features. Let's go right to here. And you can match the colors of what they are. So infill, solid layer, inner perimeter, outer perimeter, travel if you have your travel moves there, but we don't want those on. That makes too noisy of a preview here. And we can also switch to movement speed. So if you're curious how fast your printer is going, it's the exact same thing. Match up to color here to the scale, and then you'll know. So if you're printing tethered or over USB, you're going to hit this button right here, and you can send the print directly to the printer, and it starts printing. If your computer shuts down, if you close Simplify3D, your print will fail. So I'll tell you that now. I personally like to print via SD card, so I'm going to hit here to save toolpath to disk. I'll save it out to my SD card, put it in my printer, and then use the LCD screen to select the print and start it. Now down here for controls, we bring this all the way back. We go and hit play pause, and it will run through the print and let you know what you can see here, how it's going to print it out. If you hit live preview over here on the left, while you're printing via USB, you can see exactly on the screen what it's doing here. But this is a great way to kind of visualize your print, especially when you do very complicated prints. You need to check things like your support structures and things like that. You'll really want to check that out. But this is also a nice little animation here to watch. Down here at the bottom, you can go ahead and scroll it yourself manually. You can have it start at different places. So let's have it start way up here in the middle, or have it start all the way at the bottom. And you can really troubleshoot a lot and analyze your print before even printing it. You're basically doing a virtualization of it right here, right now. Now, one other little tip here. So if you go to Tools, Machine Control Panel, if you're printing via USB, this is a great thing to have up. So right here, it's going to tell you what the communication is, your temperature block, so you can see how hot your extruder and bed is. your jog control. So if you're doing any troubleshooting, you can do it right in here first. G-code library, this is what would end up being on your SD card, but obviously I don't have mine connected, so none of these are actually there. But again, that is only for if you're printing over USB. So that is the once over the moon overview of Simplify3D. I hope this helps you guys out, get familiar with the slicer. Again, there's a lot of settings in here you can change, but if you just do what I did here in the video, you will have a fairly successful or even a successful print. There is tuning that you must do with any printer and any slicer, so your mileage may vary on how quickly you can get that dialed in. I will have lots of videos to come to explain each of the individual settings inside Simplify3D, but this is somewhere to start for everyone. Again, down below there's going to be time links in here for each of the tabs. If you want to check out anything in particular, you can reference this video, click right to what you want to look at, and you'll be there very quickly. So if you guys like this video, if you learned something, if you want to see more of these, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to watch my channel more often, hit the subscribe button. You always know whenever I have some content posted. If you want to help me out, there's a Patreon link, there's affiliate links down below. All proceeds come back into your channel to help me make these kind of videos just like this or any of the other videos that I do here on my channel. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and as always, happy printing.